targets high of golf course, and I'm new here, and I'm happy to be here. To me, the most interesting thing about Castaneda is the state, the dream state, or vision, if you will, that he invokes. The process he uses to get there, and the process we may use to get to our visionary states, whether it's a substance or a process, a creative process such as a dance, a ritualistic, highly stylized Sufi dance that changes your consciousness, or be it composing a song that puts us in the state of flow. There's a guy out in California, not INKTANK, but a think tank there at UCLA now, called Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, a very strange name. But he came up with the theory of flow, that when as human beings we are involved in some kind of very highly focused activity, our brain waves change. For example, if you're composing on the piano and you have electrodes attached to your cranium, you're going to be shooting different brain waves than if you're resting comfortably and not really doing anything. So we can alter the state of consciousness if we get into flow. Now, to me, Castaneda not only gets into flow, but he starts flying. He sees his soul in flight, the so-called celestial body. And he talks about flying dreams. We all have flying dreams, but few of us have flying waking dreams. But it seems that writers, poets, creative people, dancers, I guess even when you're cooking a creative meal and you're so absorbed that nothing can get your attention. There are moments for these writers, creators, playwrights, where they actually invoke the muse. For example, in Greek myth or in Roman, Greco-Roman classical myth, writers would invoke the muse. O musa mihi causas memora. Muse, come to me, possess me, and then before you know it, you're in a state. And you're, as Ginsberg would say, rocking and rolling over lofty incantations. Sometimes in the yellow morning it turns into stanzas of gibberish, but the idea of I jam, therefore I am kind of thing is the flow you want to get into. James Joyce, in Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, which he wrote a long, long time ago, he called it an epiphany, but I think that we can see such a similarity, because right after reading this passage from Joyce, I'll read a passage from Eagle's Gift, which Castaneda published in 1981. So here's Stephen Dedalus, Greek myth, because I think that myth itself is something that Jung called the collective unconscious, or spiritus mundi, the spirit of the world, where dreams are, as Kurt said, interconnected. It's like the cloud that's up there collecting all our writings in the worldwide net and so on. It's there. It's a question of tapping into, but before we can do that, we have to open up to our own spirits, our own totems. Now, interestingly enough, for James Joyce, the Stephen Dedalus character who sees his destiny as a creature in flight very much harkens to the Greek myth, and I'll just read this because this deals with Celtic myth, the myth of the kingdom of the Danes, and also harkens back to Greek mythology. Now, as never before, his strange name, he heard the Greek pronunciation of his name, Stephanos Dedalus. It flattered his mild, proud sovereignty. Now as never before, his strange name seemed to him a prophecy. So timeless seemed the gray, warm air, so fluid and impersonal his own mood, that all ages were as one to him. A moment before, the ghost of the ancient kingdom of the Danes had looked forth through the vesture of the haze-wrapped city, Dublin. Now at the name of the fabulous artificer, Daedalus, he seemed to hear the noise of dim waves and to see a winged form flying above the waves and slowly climbing the air. What did it mean? Was it a quaint device, a page of some medieval book of prophecies and symbols, a hawk-like man flying sunward above the sea, a prophecy of the end he had been born to serve and had been following through the mists of childhood and boyhood, a symbol of the artist forging anew in his workshop out of the sluggish matter of the earth a new, soaring, impalpable, imperishable being. And he has a physical reaction, something I would call a shiver, or the passage you read, the shiver of leaves. His heart trembled, his breath came faster, and a wild spirit passed over his limbs as though he were soaring sunward. His heart trembled in an ecstasy of fear, and his soul was in flight. His soul in flight is the celestial body. His soul was soaring in an air beyond the world, and the body he knew was purified in a breath and delivered of all incertitude and made radiant and commingled with the Spirit. This is the purity that Dan talked about, why he dropped out. I never dropped in because I'm not dirty enough. I never really did those substances, so I had no way of accessing, having my synapses rearrange themselves and refire so I could open myself up. But there are other things that'll do that other than the creative process to put you in the flow, or peyote or lysergic acid. By the way, when they studied Timothy Leary and his works, some scientists, including this Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, Dr. Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, he says that the brain waves of a person on lysergic acid and the brain waves of a piano composer at the moment of composition are very similar. The spikes are quite similar. So that always interested me. William Butler Yeats, another Irish poet, before I read the Castaneda thing, I ought to bring him up. I should have done that before Joyce because he preceded Joyce in this particular work. He wrote a book called A Vision. He would get visions that he called automatic writing, writing automatically, and his wife also would get involved in this automatic writing, that they would just write down that like dictation. But he would write poems, and one I can quote you a few lines from something called The Second Coming, where he prophesied, you know, the Second World War. A vast vision of spiritus mundi, or out of spiritus mundi, troubles my sight. An image in the desert, with a gaze as blank, as pitiless as the sun, while all about it reel the indignant desert bird slouches toward Bethlehem to be born. He's talking about this new age. And he does have a book called A Vision, which you want to visit. But he also, that particular poet, talks about how we as poets or writers or creative people must, somewhere along the line, be in touch with our own private myth, not a, say, Greek myth, or the myth of Catholicism or Buddhism, or, say, a cult. But we have to find our own selves. And on page 236 of The Eagle's Nest, you see, I think we are the shaman, that the shaman is inside, that it's not, that the cathedral self is in here. We just have to know how to access it. But it begins with this vision of ourselves as colossal, basically. On 236, he says, with his guide Zuleika, we went back to the same unearthly scene over and over until we were thoroughly familiar with it. So this is a familiar image in Spiritus Mundi. Whenever we could do it, we would skip the time of glare, the daytime, and go there at night just in time to witness the rise over the horizon of a colossal celestial body, something of such magnitude that when it erupted over the jagged line of the horizon, it covered at least half of the 180-degree range in front of us. The celestial body was beautiful, and its ascent over the horizon was so breathtaking that I could have stayed there for an eternity just to witness that sight. I think what is interesting about Castaneda, that he had to access his own tribal myth, as it were, which is the Mexican totemistic myth that we now recognize with its mesa trappings. Just like the Greeks had theirs. Now I'm a child of the steppes. I'm Hungarian, so I'm connected to the Huns. Another way you can access the to break through to the self is by having a breakdown. Should I?
You're blocking your microphone.
Oh, so sorry. So I just want to read you, this was published by Pishki Corvin Press in New York. They're no longer there. He moved back to Hungary once the Russians got out, and he is a huge fan of Castaneda. In fact, he teaches, if you look him up, István Pishki, he actually teaches tensegrity and has courses in Carlos Castaneda, and has actually dancers performing to show how these segmented, stylized forms will put you in some kind of spiritual state. I myself got into my own totemistic vision of Attila the Hun, of all people, not the purest person on earth. I broke through a breakdown. So here I am at Bellevue, looking up at the ceiling. This is a veiled autobiography, Attila, a Barbarian's Bedtime Story. My mythic name is Attila. I had my DNA tested, and apparently I do belong with the Eurasians. Yes, I'm not bloodthirsty. I don't rape and kill. In fact, the strongest drink I have is an Arnold Palmer, which is, I'm afraid of Sanka. Okay, so just do a half a page of this stuff. I don't want to go crazy with this. But a female warrior kills this nobody. Am I screwing things up? Yeah. I just read that they're on the waterbed, and this guy's lover shoots him. Gun went off with a pistol shot pop on the cleavage of beasts, an arrow with aim. A small caliber bullet with his number on it left a hole gaping in the middle of his head, right by his third eye. A shudder. It wasn't a particularly pretty sight, not a Bellevue at all, and neither was there time for pain to pass into pleasure, or to covet white camellias. He fell again into mythology, this time into the character of Polyphemus. That's the big guy, you know. They got I think Ulysses blinded him in the middle of his eye. They killed him. Huge and prosaic, a tottering colossus, famous for the way he was caught and blinded. This time it was for good. What she caught was bigger than a whale, and she spread her fins wide to show how big. She caught her laggard lover twisting in the icy Hudson under the overpass, her finger up his amazing eye. But basically what I want to do now is get to the celestial form of this particular character. And it has to do with identity, but tribal identity, interestingly enough. When his eyes opened, he was drawn to a terrified vision of a shiny star in the window on the eastern horizon. Something up there concerned him though he did not understand why, only that it related to him as dramatically as his birth and his death. The only mouth, whoops, something's wrong. I'm going to have to, the only explanation that occurred to him was that somehow he had slipped out of his body, because he found that the Greek myth was too generic, this Polyphemus body, not really to his liking. It was just another skin, this Greek skin, and he would have to shed it. This is like shedding Catholicism or Protestantism or, your father's biblical work at the university. And the shedding process would begin by his staring intently at the shiny stars, which now and then seemed to move with uniform velocity, there again in the heavens. A naked rider, outlined in a light blue nebulae, was moving again serenely as if practiced in a gentle motion of Tai Chi Chuan. So you get this stylized movement. And now it vaulted from his shell of a body toward the diamond star of the fourth magnitude. Then you have these physical symptoms, which I'm going to skip just to be able to connect the dots between Joyce and Castaneda. He did not want to arm himself anymore, but only to hear his name. He dropped his frayed wicker shield, this is in his mind, ready to die, conscious of nothing but exhaustion and his inability to fight longer and the inability to rest. Only to hear himself say his own name, the mere sound of his name would be enough. He opened his mouth as wide as he could to make the A sound continuously, as if he had a tongue depressor on his tongue. The last two syllables flew out of his mouth like swift arrows. Attila. Just like for Joyce it was Daedalus, and for him it was Don Juan. Sudden rush of blood throbbed his head, the back of it feeling like an anvil. He had broken through to himself. Hearing his name called from his own mouth made his body buckle, lurch forward. Metal hinges creaked like a mechanical statue, huge, mythological, its form projecting into the sky. Raising himself once more, Attila stood at attention, and he issued specific orders to himself, marshaling all his faculties, ordering his brain to a higher frequency. His eyelids fluttered until they hung open like a blind, showing only the whites of his eyes. He called upon his pagan ancestors and the 7 stone monoliths of Pustasar to come to life. This is his tribal. So he has to connect with the tribal, and then he gets to the personal. And one more paragraph and I'm done, folks. In the middle of the sky, a staghorn deer. See, totems are always animals. I will ask my students, now, what kind of animal do you want to come, if you want, in the next life, if you want to come back? Most would say, eagle, tiger, so on. This one kid said, inside dog. I said, inside dog, not even an outside dog, inside dog.
Don Juan had crow.
Yeah.
Carlos had
Crickets, staghorn deer, which is in Hungarian mythology is a huge thing. It's a white deer and it's in the sky and it's got, these antlers. Bloody and bold and 7 times the size of the World Trade Center, reared, nay, once again he was the barbarian. So apparently we need to get back to some kind of stripped of organized religion and its rigid trappings and free ourselves and get to our pagan selves, basically, which is shamanism. It's not shamism, it's getting back to some kind of free self.
Yeah, it's the world around you, and we've done it with Henry David Thoreau.
Yeah.
We've done it with who's the other one that we the naturalist. Yeah, we did. And it's just all, and when I was reading Carlos Castaneda, I was seeing all the naturalists that we had done there too. There's life in every blade of grass.
Everything, in other words,
There's electric.
Yeah, it's not taking over a body of knowledge and adopting it.
Made of electric impulses, no matter what the form is.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Absolutely, yeah. And one thing is strange here. Once again, he was the rough shot on his mount, so totally naked, gripping the mane of his tumbling, bucking beast for life. Soon they were as one. As the beast moved, so did images issue from his mind as easily as sky-riding. Cuneiform figures swept across the sky, one after another, east to west, numbers and figures with a life of their own. They seemed to revel in their movements, in their methodical convulsion, and so on and so on. And these were basically the architectonics of the imagination. Now, so if you have a breakdown, which your whole world has to be destroyed so you can start a world anew. Now, if they would give you medication, you would never get there. You know, Tennessee Williams was offered all sorts of medications for his mental anxieties and depression, and he said, well, you may get rid of my demons, but what if you get rid of my angels? That's just it. And the angels are personal. They're tribal, personal. They're certainly not generic. That's all I have. Thank you so much.
Wow, that's great. Thank you, Peter, so much.
Okay.
Wow.
Well, we're going to end there. I'd like to, first of all, thank Peter and Dan for coming and sharing with us. I'd like to thank the Ink Tank for providing this wonderful event every month, the Blueberry Patch. Remember, we have August 7th, open mic, Chant the Trees. At the Blueberry Patch. And August 8th, every Saturday, is Volunteer Day, and you get a free pass if you volunteer. I'd like to thank Neptune Grill, Kurt Thompson, Martha Muzzy, who runs the whole thing, and of course the late, Peter Duffy. And I'm Ian, and we will see you next month for Edgar Allan Poe, which is going to be September 13th.
The little gray mouse ran up the clock, declaring to all with an ear to hear that the 100th monkey was now to appear. He pointed to the shaman, reeling and rocking, laughing and dancing, to and fro, saying this is a great mystery that only he, the shaman, knows. Well, the shaman and the 100th monkey, the great Mujojo.